Hi, I'm Nick Malowick, and welcome to An Evil Mind, a crime fiction vlog from Xenobooks. Yeah, I know, it's been a while. It's been about a month. October and November, extremely busy for me, but the third book in the Ken McGreevy series has been completed. Now we're just into the editing and formatting, and I'm working on a screenplay. So, yeah, I got an excuse. This week, I want to talk about Forerunners of James Bond. This is a thing I could do multi-part, because I'm only going to talk about 3 authors today, and I want to keep this one at 10 minutes. When I realized looking back is there's been a lot of time creep in earlier entries in the series. But so I could do probably 2 or 3 more of these, because there's a lot of authors that I believe are, if not, if we can safely assume that they were influences on Ian Fleming. In some cases there are demonstrable similarities. In some cases Fleming admits to this, and other scholars such as Kingsley Amis, who wrote a very good book about Bond and the Bond phenomenon back in the mid-60s, and may have ghost-written the Colonel's Son book that came out after Fleming's death. I think that's generally accepted. I don't know that it's 100% confirmed. Did some scholarship in this area as well. So first one I want to talk about is Bulldog Drummond, and that was written by H.C. McNeill, that series of books, although McNeill did die in 1937, and the series was continued by Gerard Fairley. Never read any of those. I've read a couple of the early McNeill ones. And Drummond is a World War I veteran, and I think in the, as we look at more of these kind of books, we're going to see this sort of thing more often. There was obviously, of course, the latter quarter of the 19th century, huge explosion in British crime fiction, generally, which really picks up after Sherlock Holmes is introduced. Of course, there was a legion of Sherlock Holmes imitators, and we'll talk about them at some point for sure. But between World War I and World War II Electric Boogaloo, there was an explosion in suspense, espionage, and thriller fiction in Great Britain. And a lot of enduring characters came to be... No idea. Now we have to look at this and see if it's noisy. If it is, I got to reshoot all this. So at any rate, we don't know. A lot of enduring series characters were created during that time. Bulldog Drummond was one of them. Drummond is sort of like he's not a noble, but he's a man with a private income. You'll see that with a lot of these heroes. He's a World War I veteran. And while the suggestion that the war has damaged him is made in the books, it's not made as strongly as it would be, say, in Dorothy Sayers' Lord Peter Wimsey books. And we'll be talking about those actually pretty soon. Drummond decides that since he has the means and leisure to do so, he is going to continue fighting bad guys as a nebulous concept after the war. Like he was one of the guys that one of the guys that helped defeat the Germans. He's going to keep up that work. So to that end, like the Equalizer, he puts an ad in the paper and invites people to bring him their problems that he can solve. And he's got like a gang of other ex-military buddies that work with him. So, not unlike, say, Doc Savage. And, he fights various anarchists and Bolsheviks and a master criminal who becomes his arch enemy named Carl Peterson. Generally, he's violent. He's sort of like, I suppose, Mike Hammer is not an unfair comparison in that Drummond tends to solve problems largely by beating the bejesus out of people or killing them outright, and it doesn't bother him, and he feels, frankly, a victorious sense of justice when he does so. Let this guy get by. We're going to switch from that over to Sax Rohmer's Fu Manchu character. Fu Manchu being the archetype of the insane, megalomaniacal Asian mad scientist character. He was the template upon which so many other... Fu Manchu as a character has been ripped off a cajillion times. Here's the Bond connection here. most notably is he's the obvious model for Dr. Julius No in the book Dr. No. Although Julius No was of mixed German-Chinese ancestry, Fu Manchu being full-bloodedly Chinese, I don't know that that makes any real difference, other than that I guess maybe Fleming decided to switch it up a little bit. Fu Manchu, while the character the series is named for is not really obviously the protagonist of the series, that's going to be Nayland Smith and Dr. Petrie. They are in the Holmes and Watson mold. Dr. Petrie, of course, the sidekick who narrates the adventures. Nayland being like a British police commissioner in British-controlled colonial Asia. And he sort of has like a wandering brief to fight enemies of the Empire as he sees them. Obviously, Fu Manchu becomes his primary focus after Manchu comes to Smith's attention. And they continue, like, basically just go back and forth, and each of them tries to kill the other for book upon book upon book. Nayland and Petrie always foiling whatever Fu Manchu's latest, world domination scheme is. So, very pulp, very proto-Bond. Both of these characters in their series is, we got to ring the racism bell on this because it's the 20s, and obviously, Sax Rohmer, not a fan of Asian people in general. The story on Wikipedia, now I don't know if this is substantiated or if this is a story that Rohmer told on himself at some point, is that he was farting around with a Ouija board, asked the Ouija board who is the greatest competitor to the white man, and the Ouija board spells out Chinaman. Yeah. So assuming that's true, that gives you an idea of the mindset we're dealing with. Also, McNeill and the Drummond books, McNeill, not a friend of the Jewish people. Jewishness in those books is synonymous with anarchism and Bolshevism / communism. We don't have this problem, incidentally, with the third series we want to talk about, and that's Leslie Charteris's Saint novels. Possibly because Charteris himself was of mixed ancestry. His dad was Chinese, mother British. Although he lived a great deal of his life in the U.S., he did die in Great Britain. Charteris, his first book out with The Saint is 1928's Meet the Tiger. And The Saint is immediately a more interesting and complex character. He's in the gentleman thief mold of, say, Raffles, or any given Pink Panther villain. Although he's not just a thief, he's also a confidence man, and he's also a former criminal. At least we are led to believe so. His backstory is hinted at, and possibly because Charteris wrote dozens of books. At some point, it may have been fully explicated in a book that I haven't gotten to yet. But the Saint has chosen to use his criminal abilities against criminals, against the corrupt, against enemies of humanity is a lofty word, but against enemies, for example, to the British nation and the British citizenry. And that theme of Britishness runs in various ways through all three of these series, and is very much present in the Bond books. Drummond, his raison d'etre is preserving Britain for the British, which we can read to be white folks, white Britishers, white Christian Britishers. The Saint is obviously a little more inclusive than that. He doesn't get into such fine distinctions. But he's a semi-reformed bad guy who enriches himself at the expense of other bad guys. He's perfectly happy to steal their money from them to finance his operations, but he's also about rooting them out and stamping them out wherever he can find them. The Saint, unlike, say, the Val Kilmer movie, which I think is probably it's not a great movie. I think it's probably a better movie than its rep suggests, although I have not seen it since seeing it in the theater in '97. Great soundtrack, though. The Saint of the books is perfectly happy to kill someone if he needs to. And he does so sometimes if he can't figure out any other way of dealing with them effectively. He's just going to wipe them out. But in general, he's like a jolly, roguish, gentleman adventurer type. Obviously, that's another Bond connection. I mean, this, all of these characters, obviously Nayland Smith has a day job, but the other two do not. They are men of independent means who have chosen to, fight the good fight for the sake of doing so. But so, the Saint never really develops an ongoing arch enemy in the Fu Manchu Carl Peterson mold. Although he transforms himself, over the course of the books. I mean, at one point he does become involved in the World War II effort. He becomes in Cold War effort. In the 50s, the Saint is fighting communists, unsurprisingly. Although, like those books probably don't reach the anti-communism fervor that we would see with something like, say, Mickey Explains My Camera books. Bring those up again. So, the Saint has never been massively successful translated to television, with the single exception of Roger Moore's TV series in Britain before Moore became Bond, which ran for about 7 years. They've tried it over here in the U.S. repeatedly. Actually, they did a pilot, I believe, 2012, 2013. I can't remember. There's an Australian guy did it, and I can't remember who. And they had Eliza Dushku as the Saint's ongoing girlfriend. But it's just really never quite made it. There was, there were TV movies in the 80s, there were TV movies in the 90s. It had some success over here in the 40s as a series of short films, like 75-minute two-reelers. And also, I think even some of the Saint books might have been adapted for the Falcon series, along with at least one book of the Philip Marlowe series that got adapted for the Falcon as well. But they're going to keep trying. Supposedly they're kicking around trying to do another Saint movie. The character is kind of fixed in its time. All of these characters are. They're very much of their original era, and I honestly don't know. I don't have any smart ideas as to why they can't seem to get them going in the latter half of the 20th century or in the 21st century. Bond is, and we'll talk about other authors too. We're going to talk about, when I do this sort of thing again, we're going to talk about Eric Ambler. We're going to talk about Graham Greene. We're talking about Somerset Maugham. We're going to talk about Dennis Wheatley. John Buchan would be another one to talk about in that. Maybe Fleming's greatest gift is synthesizing all of his predecessors in British pulp. The Bond books are pulp. They're snappier pulp than a lot of things. They're better written than a lot. My God, they're certainly better written than Bulldog Drummond or the Fu Manchu books. That's a relatively low bar. But Fleming picks and chooses, and he creates a singular character in Bond that is the result of everything that came before him, and that may be why Bond endures. It's my best guess on that, at any rate. So like I said, we've got many other authors to cover when I do this again. Coming up soon, I do want to talk about the authors that J.K. Rowling recently referred to as the Four Ladies of British Crime Fiction. Might do that actually next week. Like I said, we got to talk about the Victorian guys. I need to talk about Michael Connelly, and I haven't read the brand new book. I just got it, but I realized that, he's kind of an omission, so we should talk about Bosch at some point here. So at any rate, usual sales links are down in the description. If this is the first time you're seeing this, please subscribe to the channel. I won't permit a lengthy gap. Again, I just got behind on a lot of prep, and I got involved with some other things. But you can keep an eye on that stuff. Sign up for notifications of the channel. And thank you all very much for watching this. We'll see you later on. All right, bye.